Welcome to the Erie Music History Podcast. I'm Chip Shell, your host, and today's episode is a little bit different. First, I'm not interviewing anyone. Instead, I'm going to tell you as much as I know about possibly the most famous all-girls band from Erie. They were first known as the Seagrams and later renamed to the Female Monkees. Now, I should note that Monkees is spelled M-O-N-K-E-E-S, like the band with Davy Jones and that crazy TV show from the 60s. And Seagrams is spelled like, well, those wine coolers that you probably drank too much of in the 1980s. Now, I'm doing this alone today because the two band members that I did reach out to did not feel comfortable being interviewed, which isn't unusual to hear. I've had a lot of people tell me that over the years and pass on being interviewed for various reasons, and I'm cool with that. I respect that. That's no problem. But one of the reasons I started this podcast was to make sure that people did not forget about some of the talented musicians and bands that came out of Erie in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. And I've always wanted to do an episode on the Seagrams. So I'm guessing the band started in 1966, although it could have been 1965. I say that because the earliest gig that I could find for them was in 1966. And later, I'm going to list those gigs and the venues, which is always a fun look back in time. So we'll get to that. So who was in the band? Originally, the band consisted of Chris First on lead guitar, Jackie Koski on rhythm guitar and organ, Sherry Landis on drums, and Char French on bass. Joanne Druzak later replaced Char on bass. In a Facebook post that I saw, Joanne said that she replaced Char because Char was too young to go on tour. Now, I'm not sure how old Char was at the time, but I do know that all of the women went to school at Academy, which is where they met. And in 1966, the drummer, Sherry Landis, she was 16 years old. Now, how do I know that? Because there's this picture that was posted of the four original members that was taken in 1966 on Beach 6 on the peninsula. And Sherry had commented on that photo, and she said she was 16 at the time of that photo. That black and white photo is fantastic, by the way. It shows all four members, two blondes and two with dark hair, wearing matching white pants and striped shirts, all leaning on their individual instruments. Sherry's bass drum has the Seagrams written on it in a fun-looking script font. They look like the typical surf band from the 60s that you would expect to be playing at somewhere like that fictitious Shrimp Shack, which is really hard to say, Shrimp Shack, from the movie That Thing You Do. Although, according to Sherry, they played what was called the top 40 of the pop charts. So they really weren't a surf band. They were playing top 40. She says anything you could dance to is what they were playing. Now, the oldest advertisement that I could find for them was for a performance in May of 1966 at a place called the Chatterbox, which some of you may remember. The Chatterbox is the current location of Alex Power Sports. It's on Peninsula Drive. So it's about 13th and Peninsula Drive, I'd say. They had a lot of bands play there back in the day. So anyway, at the end of May of 1966, they appeared on TV. They were on TNT, which back then stood for Teens and Talent. And it was a TV show on WICU, Channel 12, that ran on Saturday nights. In that advertisement for that TNT show, it described the Seagrams as a rollicking rock and roll girls band from Academy. Also on that bill that night for the TNT show, you had a few other bands. I love these names. The Colorful Parasol Dancers from St. Benedict's, the Belltones, a trio of girls songsters, it's a great word, from Academy, Linda and Her Girls, which was a double trio of singers from Strong Vincent, Tech, and Roosevelt, and one lone guy, Patrick Williams, a folk ballad singer from Conneaut, Ohio. I wonder how Patrick Williams felt when he showed up to the taping of that show and there were all these girls. It must have been a good deal. So that was in 1966. They were on TV, May of 1966. Next thing I find is an ad from December 22nd of that same year, 1966, that had them playing a pre-holiday teen dance at a place called Wanda's Hall, which was at 340 East 12th Street, which is about a block west of Parade Street. I don't know what happened at Wanda's Hall. There's still buildings there. I don't know if they're the original buildings, but I had never heard of it. So that's December of 1966. In January of 1967, they play a place called Scott's Place, which was on Route 20, about a mile and a half east of Northeast. Then in May of 1967, they played at a place not too far from Scott's Place in Northeast. They played at this place called Grapeland in Ripley, New York. Now again, keep in mind, I'm not saying that these are all of the places that they played gigs. They very well may have played other events like YCO, which was basically like a teen dance held at YMCA, or other places that I couldn't find references to. They may have played other places, but I'm not sure. This is all I could find. What I do know is that they had a manager named Doug Boyd at some point. Now, I know that because when I interviewed Skip Niebauer of the band The RK4, Skip brought in a big scrapbook of all these clippings from his bands and some other local bands, and randomly in that scrapbook was a Seagrams business card listing all the members and Doug as their manager. I also know that thanks to some Facebook posts, in 1967, the band got an agent from New York City. So this is a big deal. This small little band of all girls from Erie that's only been around for about a year, they get a New York City agent, and then that agent says, hey, we want to change the name of your band to the Female Monkees, obviously to play up on the popularity of the other band, the Monkees. I'm guessing that name change happened around July of 1967. Because on June 23rd, 1967, they played a gig as the Seagrams at the Cesar Batiste Club. I hope I'm saying that right. Cesar Batiste Club, which was at 1602 East 38th Street. That club is currently the CYS Club, so it's still there, or at least there's a building there. And then after that, that was the last time that I have them playing under the name the Seagrams. So I'm guessing that their manager at the time, or their agent, said, hey, you're the Female Monkees from now on. In fact, in the summer of 1967, they go on tour. And that led to Joanne replacing Shar. Remember, Shar was too young to go on tour. I don't know why the other ones weren't too young, but so they mostly tour in Canada, in French provinces, based on the ads that some of the members have posted on Facebook, which are all in French. In some of those gigs, they were booked with the Canadian Platters and other bands. There were other bands on the bills for those gigs. Once they were on their way up the East Coast, they stopped in a place called Tuckerton, New Jersey, after enjoying a few days on the boardwalk in Atlantic City. There they played a bar called Sabu's Village Inn that was owned by the father of one of the guys in the band called Danny and the Juniors, who had a one-hit. They were a one-hit wonder, 1957, with a song called At the Hop. So kind of a cool little side note. So the girls are playing in the summer of 1967 in Canada and up and down the East Coast. But then I'm not really sure what happens the rest of 67. I'm guessing because these girls are likely 17, 18 years old, they probably came back to Erie to finish high school. I'm not sure. Because the next ads that I could find about them playing at all, and these are the last ads that I found, were from March of 1968, where they played DeArmond's Cafe, which was at 2005 West 26th Street. That building is not there anymore. It's just east of the 79 interchange. And then in August of 1968, they played the same place, but it had a new name back then already. It was called Pietro's. So between March of 68 and August of 68, DeArmond's Cafe became Pietro's. And interestingly enough, at Pietro's, the ad billed them as hard rock music, which maybe at the time somebody thought they were, but I doubt these four girls were banging out what we consider hard rock music these days. So that was August of 1966, 1968. And according to Joanne, the band broke up in the early 1970s when she moved to Boston. So I don't know what happened after that. I do know that Chris First and Sherry Landis continued to play in other bands for a while in Erie. Some of those bands included Hot Cakes, hot with 2 T's, Thunder and Lightning, and Contour, which I had mentioned in one of my previous episodes with Mike Lotz. He played in Contour. That's about all I know about what happened to the Seagrams. So they didn't play very long together, and they were very young when they were doing it. But I still wanted to make sure that I recognized these women on this podcast, because at the time, that was a big deal. They were a big deal. I mean, how many teenage bands from Erie got to tour the East Coast and Canada? That was a big accomplishment. And they definitely contributed to Erie music history. So if you know any members of the Seagrams, or the Female Monkees as they became known, please share this episode with them. And remember, I've moved all of the episodes for the Erie Music History podcast to YouTube, so anyone can access them, even if you don't use a podcast app on your phone. Now, I plan to do some other retrospective episodes like this in the future, but I also plan to continue to interview people in person, like normal. So to wrap this up, I'd like to say thanks for listening. And remember, I host a monthly free live music night the first Tuesday of the month at the JPT Center on West 38th in the old Hills Plaza, if you remember that. It's right next to Our Lady of Peace Church on West 38th Street. It's a bingo hall right now, but the first Tuesday of the month, we have this live music night where we have our house band, the Fabulous Leftover Orchestra, a group of great veteran Erie musicians who play classic rock favorites. They start out the night at 6 o'clock and they play till about 7:15 or so. And then we switch it out and we have a different guest band play each month after that. So it goes from 6 to 9, totally free, and all the donations go to the Second Harvest Food Bank. It's a fun event, and it's for a good cause. We get about 100 people each month. Remember, this is a monthly thing. So check out this podcast's Facebook page for the schedule, because this podcast is the sponsor of that music night. And keep listening in the future. I hope to have some other episodes coming out in the next few months. But overall, I want to thank everybody, as usual, for listening. And remember, get out there and support live music. Thanks a lot.